Hello, everyone. This is the 164th episode of the Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles and the Soccer Nostalgia blog. Unfortunately, Mr. Paul Whittle from the 1888 letter blog could not make it this time. For this episode, I interview Spanish author and historian Mr. Sergio Vilariño Ferreiro as we discuss the matches of the Spanish national team during the 1984-85 season. Mr. Vilariño is the author of México 50 años de fútbol en color. Welcome back, Sergio.
Hi, Shahan. Thanks for having me back. Always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you. So let's go back in time. Last time must have been last year. We
Yeah,
discussed, we discussed Spain during the 1983-84 season that culminated with the team reaching the final of the 1984 Euros.
yes.
Now we come to the fall of 1984. What was the state of the Spanish national team in this fall of 1984 following these successful 1984 Euros?
At the beginning of the 84-85 season, there was an optimistic atmosphere regarding the Spanish national team. It had been proven that Spain had a good team, and moreover, the arrival of the generation led by Emilio Butragueño, the Quinta del Buitre, was already on the horizon. So there was a strong, solid, ambitious, high quality core that had been formed to face basically any challenge, or at least that's what we thought. It was also important to take advantage of the fact that none of the players who formed the backbone of the Euro 84 team had retired from the national squad. But on the other hand, the situation regarding the president of the Spanish Federation, which we had previously mentioned as very unstable, had a major development. Jose Luis Roca became the new president after a decree law that prevented Pablo Porta from continuing as the head of the organization. As we said before, there were like a power struggle for a couple of years, and in the end it was basically decided that Porta could not continue and Roca was installed as the new president, which probably he's not going to be much better than his predecessor.
As you mentioned, usually after tournaments you have players retiring, but that was not
Mhm.
the case this time. You still had the veterans like Luis Arconada, Carlos Santillana, and others still within the team. Miguel Munoz had a backbone to work with, looking forward to the 1986 World Cup. They were in a balanced group for these World Cup qualifiers, in a four-team group with Scotland and Wales, and even the weakest team in this group, Iceland, were a difficult team to beat playing away. Was there a belief that after the Euros, Spain should be the favorites in this group?
Yeah, it was believed that there was a good chance to qualify for the World Cup, although Scotland had a strong team with great players who played for British top clubs, probably were considered the toughest opponent. But the Welsh also had several world-class players, such as Neville Southall and Kevin Ratcliffe and Mark Hughes and Ian Rush, for example, right? To name a few. Even if the away game in Reykjavik could be tricky, Spain expected to secure those 4 points against Icelandic and then compete with Scotland and Wales for a spot in Mexico. That was the vision that we have, and in the end, it more or less went through like that.
It's a far cry from these days where most groups are like 8 teams and
Yeah,
like in
all
an
that good
international
matches.
window you play like 4 matches or 3 matches or
Yes.
different times. Let's look at the first World Cup qualifier. Incidentally, Spain didn't play any friendlies following the Euros until this match in October. So let's look at this first World Cup qualifier against Wales on October 17th, 1984 at Sevilla at Sanchez Pizjuan. And as you mentioned, the Welsh team, you do have some familiar faces like Southall, Radcliffe, Hughes, and Rush, among others. Although Ian Rush did not play in this first match.
Mhm.
For this match on October 17th, you have the following lineup for Spain. Starting in goal, the captain of the team, Luis Arconada of Real Sociedad. Juan Senor of Real Zaragoza. Antonio Maceda of Sporting Gijón, whose absence was felt in the final against France. And he scored
Yeah.
a number of key goals in the Euros. Andoni Goicoechea of Bilbao. Camacho of Real Madrid, Victor of Barcelona, Rafael Gordillo of Real Betis, Francisco Lopez of Sevilla. He'd be replaced by Roberto Fernandez of Valencia in the 33rd minute. Francisco Carrasco of Barcelona. Making his international debut, Emilio Butragueño of Real Madrid. And Hipólito Rincon of Real Betis, who, let's remind everyone, he missed out in the 1984 Euros in the last minute due to an injury.
Mhm.
And he'd be replaced by Julio Alberto of Barcelona in the 80th minute. This match would be a comfortable victory for Spain, still confident from the 1984 Euros, playing at home. So Spain takes the lead in the 7th minute, where from the middle, Carrasco sent Rincon through to go and score. But they had to wait towards the end to score the other two goals. So in the 83rd minute, Carrasco scored from a free kick. And in the last minute, Gordillo crossed from the left side. And on his debut, Emilio Butragueño scored his first goal. And we should mention that Wales had scored a goal in the 60th minute that was ruled
Mhm.
out by Mark Hughes.
Yeah.
First match, first win. We already discussed the impact of Emilio Butragueño in our podcast on Real Madrid during the 1984-85 season. But what more can you say about where he was at this point in his career?
Butragueño was already really well established, started at the Real Madrid. El Buitre had made his debut with Real Madrid in February of that same year in a famous match against Cadiz, where he secured the victory for his team, who had been trailing against the home side. He was the great hope of Madrid's youth academy and had already been called up, as you said, for Euro 84 as a replacement of Poli Rincon. And later I'll talk about the game against Wales because they played together, right? Although he did not play in that tournament, he had started the season well, and his place in the national team seemed assured. And it's important to say that this game against Wales came just 2 months before his outstanding performance in the second leg match against Anderlecht in the UEFA Cup, when he scored 3 goals, provided 2 assists for Jorge Valdano in a 6-1 victory at Bernabeu, cementing his status at the European level. Talking about the game against the Welsh, this is the first match of the qualifiers. Spain returns to Seville, the venue of the famous game against Malta, right? Everybody knows that 12-1 victory left a lasting mark on an entire generation, really. And the biggest surprise, Munoz in his starting lineup, was the position of Señor, who started at right back. This was a common tactical move in the 70s and 80s. Tomislav Ivic had been the pioneer of this strategy when he was coaching Hajduk Split, allowing the team's playmaker to escape the tight marking and the midfield battle in order to bring the ball out cleanly from the back. Overall, Spain opened the qualifiers with a great performance against the Welsh. The goals, as you said, came a little bit late. The team was increasingly desperate to extend the narrow lead from Rincon's early goal in the 8th minute, I think. And Carrasco and Butragueño scored 2 goals in the last 10 minutes of the game. Everything seemed to be back on track. But in the return match, the Welsh proved they were not as weak as they had appeared in Seville.
Spain had been on a high since the Euros, but they would have a rude awakening in their next match, in their next qualifier against Scotland at Glasgow. This match on November 14th at Glasgow at Hampden Park, we have the following lineup: Luis Arconada, captain of the team; Santiago Urquiaga of Bilbao. This would be his final cap for Spain, his 14th and final cap for Spain. His first cap had been in 1980. Maceda, Goicoechea, Camacho, Victor. Making his international debut, Ismail Urtubi of Bilbao. And he'd be replaced by Carrasco in the 80th minute. Senor, Gordillo, Carlos Santillana of Real Madrid, Rincon, and he'd be replaced by Butragueño in the 46th minute. Scotland, a number of familiar faces: Alex McLeish and Willie Miller of Aberdeen in defense, Graham Souness, captain of the team, Kenny Dalglish, Paul McStay, Mo Johnson, managed by the legendary Jock Stein. In this match, Scotland takes the lead in the 33rd minute. Maceda's headed clearance was volleyed by Steve Nicol at the edge of the box. Arconada parried, but Johnson was there at the doorstep and knocked in the rebound.
Yeah.
They scored a second goal in the 42nd minute, just before halftime. Jim Bett's cross from the right side was headed in by Mo Johnson for his second goal. Spain would pull a goal back in the second half in the 65th minute when Camacho's free kick from the left side was headed in by Goicoechea. But just a few minutes later, in the 70th minute, Steve Nicol takes a throw in on the right side. It reached Davy Cooper, who immediately passed to Dalglish, who cut inside the box and shot past Arconada. A beautiful goal.
Yep.
So Scotland wins 3-1. Already it's time to worry for Spain because it was a decisive victory for the Scots. Did this kind of end the honeymoon with the Euro 84 vibe and all that? It basically showed that they have to get down to business now.
Yeah, because that was the point when some nervousness started to go under the skin of the players and mainly under the skin of the press, which is always kind of a big problem in Spain. As we mentioned before, the match at Hampden Park was considered like the toughest fixture in the entire qualifying group. You were leading us through some of the names of the Scottish team, right? They had a very strong team. They were led by the legendary Jock Stein, right? Spain fielded many of their usual starters, right, with the inclusion of Urtubi and the return of Santillana as a central striker, while Butragueño started on the bench but replaced Rincon early in the second half. Spain was already at that moment trying to cut the deficit after those two goals from Johnston, but the Spanish midfield struggled in the first half. Arconada had to make some key saves to keep the team in the game, and neither Urtubi nor Gordillo were particularly effective. The latter actually was expected to be a key player because his role on the left flank was meant to exploit the space left behind by Steve Nicol's attacking runs. But however, the Andalusian had a disappointing performance. Goicoechea, the Athletic Bilbao defender, scored in the 67th minute. Spain reacted more like with anger or fury than with quality football, but the Scots managed to regain control without much trouble. They were a really good team. And then, as you said, Kenny Dalglish scored that beautiful goal, and Arconada had to prevent even an even heavier defeat. So already the next game against the Scots was, but this time at the Sánchez Pizjuán, the home of the Sevilla Football Club, right? It was considered the decisive game already because a defeat could have given the Scots a huge advantage for the rest of the campaign.
The year 1984 ends. Now we come to the year 1985. As you said, the return match against Scotland was already a must-win fixture for Spain to have any hopes of qualifying from this group. Before that, early in the year, there's a friendly against Finland in January. On January 23rd at Alicante, Spain faces Finland. For this match, we have Luis Arconada, captain of the team, in goal. He'd be replaced by international debutant Andoni Zubizarreta of Bilbao in the 46th minute. We have Gerardo of Barcelona, Maceda. He'd be replaced by Francisco Lopez in the 46th minute. Goicoechea, Camacho, Ricardo Gallego of Real Madrid, Senior. He'd be replaced by Roberto Fernandez in the 46th minute. Julio Alberto. He'd be replaced by Ismail Urtubi in the 46th minute. This was Urtubi's second and final cap for Spain, and the previous match against Scotland was his first match. We have international debutant Rojo of Barcelona, Hipólito Rincon. He'd be replaced by Manuel Sarabia in the 27th minute, I believe after he was injured,
Mhm.
and Butragueño. Carrasco missed this match through injury. He had been in a car accident prior to that.
Yeah.
And also Rafael Gordillo missed this match through injury. So Spain wins this match 3-1. Mika Lipponen scores for Finland in the 7th minute. Rincon ties the match in the 21st minute. Spain get a penalty kick in the 30th minute after Butragueño was fouled by Europeus in a box, and Butragueño himself scored a penalty kick, and he scored Spain's third goal in the 45th minute, and Spain wins 3-1. I have not been able to see any footage of this match anywhere. I'm not even sure it was televised. I imagine it would have been,
No,
but I haven't been able to find
it
anything.
was televised, but probably it was not even live. So,
Yeah,
because there was not that much football in Spain at that moment, and some of the games, if they were not deemed interesting, especially friendly games,
all
they
right.
were just show highlights or like very extended highlights, or they were just not live. But this is the game that kind of confirmed the positive expectations surrounding Butragueño, right? He had a good partnership with Rincon, and at that moment, it seemed that that was going to be the attacking couple for the national team throughout the next World Cup cycle, although in the end, it never happened, right? And also, as you said, this was Zubizarreta's debut, right? The player who would go on to hold Spain's record for most international appearances for many years. It seemed at that moment that Arconada still had a lot of football left in him, and he was also the national team captain. But few could have imagined that in that match against Finland, we were witnessing the goalkeeper who would be Spain's undisputed starter for the next 13 years. He played 4 World Cups, 2 European Championships, 125 internationals. And the other name that was relevant that you mentioned was Rojo, right? Rojo was one of Barcelona's emerging talents and made it to the national team quite quickly. Terry Venables took him under his wing and as one of his proteges. He was an attacker who played wide, but was not particularly prolific in front of goal at the time. But he was mobile. He created a lot of danger, and Munoz kind of like his style. But he was not going to be like a big name in the national team.
Barcelona were league leaders at this time. They would regain the league title after 11 years that season, like I said, with
Yeah.
Terry Venables as manager. And you see Gerardo coming back to the national team. I believe he must have been last cap maybe before 1982 or around then.
See, yeah, he was in the team for the World Cup.
And like you said, Rojo starting as well. So that was a further confirmation of Barcelona's good form at this moment. And of course, the key selection was that of Zubizarreta, that, like you said, I don't think many could foresee that he would have the long career that he had. At this
Absolutely.
point, Arconada is still the captain of the team and the national team starter. But
Yeah.
of course, all that would change before the end of the season.
Yeah.
We come to this return fixture against Scotland in
Mm.
February that Spain has to win. They have to win if they want to have any chance to reach the World Cup.
Yeah.
This match is on February 27th, 1985, at Sevilla at Sanchez Pizjuan. For this match, we have the following lineup for Spain: Luis Arconada, captain of the team; Gerardo, Goicoechea, Maceda, Camacho, Senior, Roberto, Gallego. He'd be replaced by Julio Alberto in the 82nd minute, Gordillo, Butragueño, and making his international debut, Francisco Clos of Barcelona. The Spanish league matches had been postponed to prepare for this match. You
That's
know,
something that was unseen at the time, and probably it didn't happen again later on. So you can imagine that this game was kind absolutely decisive for everybody.
as far as the Scottish, so there's many players who took part in the first leg, but you also have like Richard Gough of Dundee United, Gordon Strachan would come in late in the game. But most importantly, you have Steve Archibald, who was scoring many goals for Barcelona in
Yeah.
this title winning season. And
Yes.
in fact, Much to the amazement of the Spanish press and Miguel Munoz, Archibald was not initially called up. He was only called up after Kenny Dalglish had to withdraw because he had the flu. We have to mention that the Scottish training sessions were disrupted by gate crashers. And also during the match, we will discuss oranges, toilet paper rolls were thrown at the Scottish goalkeeper, Jim Leighton.
That's
So,
football in the 80s.
yeah, exactly.
In a nutshell.
Yeah. This match, Spain would score the decisive goal right after halftime in the 48th minute.
Mhm.
Butragueño passed to Senor, who crossed from the right side, and the debutant Klose headed in the winner.
Yeah.
And Spain won this key match 1-0. In the end, perhaps this win turned out to be the most crucial of the qualifiers for Spain.
Yeah, as we said, this was a decisive game already because if the Scots win in Sevilla, they would have a huge advantage for the rest of the campaign. Spain saw the return to the starting 11 of Roberto Fernandez, the young Valencia midfielder who had made his debut at the Euros final, as we said in our one of our last meetings,
Mhm.
right? And he went and played with Senor at the heart of the Spanish midfield. He was kind of a two-way player, right, who could help Senor. He fought, he regained a lot of loose balls, but he was also a technical player who could pass the ball. And up top, Butragueño was starting, and alongside him, we found Klos, another of those not so young La Masia products at that moment, same as Rojo. Who thrived under Venables in Barcelona, and he was the man of the hour because it was his goal, the one that gave Spain the 2 points against Scottish teams without starts such as Alan Hansen or Kenny Dalglish, but with new talented players like Paul McStay and Richard Goff and Charlie Nicholas, for example. Right, so it was a good team, and once again, it was the way for Spain to regain some of that confidence to think that we can go to the World Cup, right? And this win kept the trio of Spain, Scotland, and Wales really tight and made the visit to the racecourse ground in Wrexham very important.
Spain's next qualifier would be against Wales in April.
Yeah.
But in between, to prepare for this match, there was a friendly against another British side, Northern Ireland.
Mhm.
So this friendly was on March 27th at Palma de Mallorca. And in fact, this was the first ever international match played there.
Mhm.
For Spain, Miguel Munoz, the manager, was out sick with the flu, so Vicente Miera would stand in for Munoz. Miera, in time, would be the manager of the national team for like a brief season, 91, 92. And also, he would also be the manager of the Spanish Olympics team in 1992 at Barcelona.
Mhm.
Northern Ireland, let's remember, they had defeated Spain in the 1982 World Cup, managed by Billy Bingham. Some familiar faces, goalkeeper Pat Jennings, who was earning his 109th cap that day, and he broke Bobby Moore's British record on that day. Others who might remember Jerry Armstrong, who was playing at Mallorca, incidentally, at
Yeah, he was playing at home.
the young teenager Norman Whiteside of Manchester United as well.
Correct. Yeah.
For this match, we have Arconada, captain of the team, Gerardo, Julio Alberto, Goicoechea, Maceda, Gordillo, Senor, Roberto Fernandez, Gallego. He'd be replaced by Victor in the 46th minute. Butragueño. He'd be replaced by Rincon in the 71st minute. Klos. He'd be replaced by Rojo in the 71st minute. This match would end as a scoreless tie. Not sure what Spain gained from this encounter heading into the
Nothing.
next match. Yeah.
Nothing, as we said. this preparation game, Spain used
Huh.
mostly the same team that beat the Scots, but the game was really bad and it was deemed by the press as useless. It was okay in terms of team cohesion and camaraderie and all that stuff, but in football terms, it didn't add anything new. The press considered the game had to be played away because it was supposed to be a dress rehearsal for the game in Wales, and it would be a good practice to play against a British team who was going to be attacking us, etc. But in the end, we played at home. The Northern Irish played a very defensive game, not really mimicking what was expected from the Welsh. And on top of that, this terrible game, right? To put some extra pressure to the team, Wales defeated Scotland in Glasgow in a very surprising result. And now the group was really tight.
We come to this crucial qualifier against Wales at Wrexham on April 30th, 1985. That's forever remembered for that Mark Hughes goal. And let's remember that again, Wales, they still have the big name, like I said, Southall, Radcliffe. For this match, they have Ian Rush back. They're playing at home. They're confident from the away win against Scotland the previous month, and at home, they have to win themselves. For this match, Spain playing in blue. You have Arconada. For the legendary goalkeeper, this would be his final cap, his
Mhm.
68th and final cap. His first match had been in 1977. We have Gerardo, Julio Alberto, Maceda, Goicoechea, Gordillo, Rincon. He'd be replaced by Klos in the 67th minute. And this would be his third and final cap as well. And his first match was against Scotland just a couple of months before.
Yeah.
Gallego, he'd be replaced by international debutant Ramon Caldere of Barcelona in the
Yeah.
46th minute. You have the international debutant Inigo Liceranzu of Bilbao, for whom this would be his one and only cap for Spain.
Yeah.
Victor and Rojo. Spain would be trounced in this match, and just like the match against Scotland, it showed their limitations playing away from home. They lost 3-0. In the 45th minute, Wales takes the lead. Ratcliffe has a long cross from the middle. It was headed back by the Spanish defense. There was confusion as neither Maceda or Arconada picked up the loose ball, and Rush took advantage and just knocked it in.
Yeah.
In the 53rd minute, we have that goal by Mark Hughes. There's a free kick from the right side that was headed back by Goicoechea, and Mark Hughes scored in an acrobatic fashion to give Wales a 2-0 lead. Just before the end, in the 88th minute, from the middle, Mark Hughes sent Rush through and he scored his second and Wales's third goal. Heavy defeat. It would have ramifications, like we said, for Arconada. How was this disastrous and heavy loss at Wales viewed at the time? Was there a genuine fear that Spain might miss out at the World Cup?
Well, yeah, what happened in Wrexham is remembered as probably one of the darkest nights in Spanish football history. Spain was thrashed by a Welsh team that showed everything they didn't in Sevilla in the first leg, right? The presence of Ian Rush in attack alongside Mark Hughes was a nightmare for the Spanish defenders. The duo combined for the three Welsh goals. Wales played the typical British game of the 80s, long balls, a lot of pressure, and Munoz kind of prepared the team for it, although what happened in the game against Northern Ireland, we already know. He brought Íñigo Liceranzu, as you said, who was Goicochea's partner as central defender in Athletic Bilbao, who was basically a British team playing in the Spanish league, right? And because he thought, okay, these guys know how to play together, they will be prepared to mark both Welsh strikers. But in reality, it didn't matter. Hughes and Rush were unstoppable that game. And another player who was not very known in Spain, Mickey Thomas, right, was also very dangerous and created a lot of chances for his team. I think this is the typical example of lack of knowledge of who is on the other side, right? Which is obviously typical from the 80s. There were not these huge scouting reports that we have nowadays. So sometimes a new player appeared and surprised you. One of the names that you mentioned before was Calderé, who was making his debut. He's another of those Barcelona players who were not like special players, but they thrived under the leadership of Terry Venables. As we saw with Rojo and with Klose, he's going to have some important moments in the national team, although his career with the national team is going to be longer than that of the other two. And obviously, as you said, now there was true fear for the national team to miss the World Cup. The only option was to take the 4 points against the Icelandic, try to score as much as possible, and wait for the results between Welsh and Scots to see if there was a chance to go to Mexico. This brought back some Malta vibes from the Euro 84 qualifications. And last but not least, as you can imagine, Munoz's critics had not one but several field days after the disaster in Wales.
This match effectively ended the international career of Luis Arconada. Was that self-evident at that point, and how would you summarize his international career?
Well, no one knew at that time, but that was Arconada's last match for the Spanish national team. It wasn't his best game, but it wasn't his worst either. However, as team captain, he inevitably had to face criticism, some of which was fair, like the first goal, a mistake between Marconada and Maceda, but some of which was undeserved. There was a lot of political issues with Arconada, right? Mainly because some people accused him of being a Basque nationalist because he was not wearing the national team socks that included the Spanish flag, but he was wearing just the plain white socks that he used when he was playing with Real Sociedad, and he was accused of not being a good example of a national team player, right? For the match in Iceland, Muñoz opted for Zubizarreta. The match was at the end of the season, and by the time the Icelandic visited Sevilla in the final qualifier in September 85, Arconada had suffered a serious injury that would keep him out of the entire 85-86 season, raising even concerns about his career because that injury was deemed like a career-ending one. But eventually, the Basque goalkeeper recovered and returned to a good level, even leading Real Sociedad to the Copa del Rey title in 1987. However, by then, Muñoz had already decided that Zubizarreta was his trusted goalkeeper, and to avoid undermining his confidence, he chose not to recall Arconada, who eventually retired in 89. He will always be remembered with immense affection by the fans. It can be said that there are very few football supporters in Spain who do not admire Arconada. He's universally regarded as one of the greatest Spanish goalkeepers of all time.
Before this final qualifier of the season against Iceland, there's another friendly that perhaps should have been played ahead of the match against Wales. So
Yeah.
this is against the Republic of Ireland on May 26th at Cork.
Mhm.
Incidentally, this was the first international match in Cork in 46 years. For the Irish, some familiar names: Liam Brady, captain of the team; Michael Robinson, who actually remembered for his stint at Osasuna, as well as a journalist in Spain.
Yeah, he's a legend in Spain.
The late Michael Robinson. Yeah.
Yeah.
For this match, we have starting for the first time, who would remain in his post until 1998, I
Eight.
believe. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Andoni Zubizarreta starting in goal for the first time. Gerardo, Maceda, Goicoechea, Camacho, Victor, Gallego. He'd be replaced by Caldere in the 70th minute. Gordillo. He'd be replaced by Julio Alberto in the 76th minute. Marcos Alonso of Barcelona. I can't recall when was his previous cap. It must have been in the either previous season or maybe the one before that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So Marcos Alonso of Barcelona. And he'd be replaced by International debutant Roberto Marina of Atletico Madrid in the 82nd
Mhm.
minute. And
Yeah,
this would be his one and only cap for Spain, these eight
yeah,
minutes.
yeah. As always, we say with Miguel Muñoz, these friendlies are basically useless. I don't know who prepared them or who was thinking about them, but they never gave us any meaningful conclusions. It's unbelievable.
We have Santillana, he'd be replaced by Sarabia in the 85th minute, and Rincon. This ended as a scoreless tie. Not much could be judged from this match, I imagine. And this is another match I have not been able to find any footage from.
Either, me
Yeah.
neither. I was trying to look at it and it was difficult. The only thing that we can get out of it is that Muñoz gave minutes to Zubizarreta, to Marcos Alonso, to Marina, and to Calderé, but in the end, as we said before, nobody draw meaningful conclusions. The aforementioned players were kept in the orbit of the national team. Zubizarreta obviously became undisputable starter, right? Calderé went to the World Cup and remained for the next cycle to the Euros, while Marcos and Marina, if I'm not mistaken, were in the preliminary squad for Mexico. There was another midfield player, Kike Ramos, who was going to have a chance against later on against the Icelandic. But in the end, I think Munoz had a pretty clear idea of who his midfielders were. And those are the names that we've been repeating for the last couple of podcasts, right? Senor and Carrasco
Gallego,
and Gordillo,
Gordillo, yeah,
Gordillo,
yeah.
Gordillo, Francisco, and all those people. Roberto. He was giving those minutes to players who were kind of playing well at that moment in the league, but in the end, they had no chance.
Getting back to Zubizarreta, was it announced at this point that he will be the number one for Spain, or that was not announced? It was just for this match that he was starting, although he would remain the number one.
Nobody talked about it. This was an issue that was kind of going under the radar. Everybody was asking what happens with Arconada now because Zubizarreta was called up for the friendly against Ireland, right? So I think at the beginning nobody thought about Thubi displacing Arconada, but with the captain's injury later on, there was no other option. So by the time Arconada came back, it was too late for him and too easy for Munoz to not call him up. He even declared that Arconada cannot be on the bench and considered benching him as showing the goalkeeper no respect. So he decided to not call him up at all. The injury made the transition easier for everybody, including the fans. The only moment of discussion was when Zubizarreta was the starter against Iceland, because that was at the end of the season. Arconada was still a starter with Real Sociedad, but it happened at the same time Real Sociedad sacked Alberto Ormaechea, who was like his legendary coach who won the leagues, etc. So that was the big deal, the big news at the moment. And the fact that Arconada was not called up for the national team kind of was in the background. So later on, as we said, with the injury, the transition was already done.
So we come to the final qualifier of the season. Again, it's a must win for Spain
Mhm.
against Iceland that they're expected to defeat. This is on June 12th, 1985, at Reykjavik, very late in the season.
Yeah.
And let's remind everyone that in those days, I think the Spanish league finished sometime in late April, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
very, very, very early because it was a short league. I think it was 16 or 18 teams. So
18 teams, yeah.
yeah.
For this match on June 12th, we have the following lineup: Zubi Zareta, Gerardo, Maceda, Goicoechea, captain of the team and official captain from this moment on, Camacho of Real Madrid, Victor Gallego. He'd be replaced by Caldera in the 77th minute. Kike Ramos of Atletico Madrid. This would be his fourth and final cap for Spain. His first cap had been in 1981.
Mhm.
Rincon, he'd be replaced by Sarabia in the 46th minute. Santillana, this would be his 56th and final cap for Spain. His first cap had been in 1975.
Yeah.
And Marcos Alonso. Surprisingly, Iceland takes the lead in the 33rd minute when Atli Edvaldson's cross from the right side was headed in by Teitur Thordarson.
Mhm.
Spain ties the match in the 49th minute. From the middle, Sarabia does a combination play with Victor and he advances to score. In the 67th minute, on the right side, Gallego sent a long cross that Marcos Alonso headed in. Spain wins an important away qualifier. There was one more match left against the same opponents that they were expected to win again and
Yeah.
hope to see that the other two teams cancel each other out.
Yeah, it was a very hard game. As you said, the home team took the lead half an hour into the match, and really black clouds were hanging up Muñoz's head at that moment. There was even talk of him losing his position if Spain was not qualifying for the World Cup. The first half was truly a display of pure frustration. Spain dominated possession but wasn't able to create goal scoring opportunities, and we will talk about this a little bit later. I think the team responded in the second half and managed to come back with goals from Sarabia, who had almost disappeared after the Euros because he was in a conflict with Javier Clemente at Athletic Bilbao. They still hate each other nowadays because they know how to hold a grudge. And Marcos Alonso at the end kind of saved the day. Munoz, after the game, he stated that the match reminded him of a Copa del Rey tie between a top division team and a lower league side. Like the lower league side, the Icelandic enthusiasm compensated for Spain's technical superiority for much of the game. So that was an important victory, but as you said, Spain didn't relied on what was going to happen on the Wales-Scotland match. So victory against the Icelandic in Sevilla was necessary, but that was not confirming Spain's ticket to Mexico even.
This was an important and much needed away win to close a relatively disappointing season. Was there a feeling that the hard work was over now? As like we mentioned, it was now a battle between Scotland and Wales for the next spot. So the worst in a way was done for Spain.
The feeling was similar to that of the famous match against Malta, but with even greater difficulty because Spain was not in control of its own destiny. Wales seemed to be the clear favorite after defeating Scotland in Glasgow, thrashing Spain in Wrexham, but there was a draw between the two British teams, and that opened the door wide for Spain. But once again, the Icelandic took the lead. Spain had to fight for a desperate comeback. The game was really tough, and really when Gordillo scored the winning goal after Rincon had equalized, euphoria erupted among the players and the crowd. And it had been a hard-fought battle, but at the end, Spain was going to Mexico. It was also a great moment for Gordillo, who had a difficult season with the national team, and in the end, he kind of became the hero of the qualification for Mexico.
This match was the last for Real Madrid legend Carlos Santillana. How would you summarize his international career?
Yeah, this is a very similar case to Arconadas. No one suspected that this has been or had been his last match. Santillana was still, at that time, an important player for Real Madrid, even with the emerging Butragueño taking minutes away from him. And the following year, he would continue to be decisive in Madrid's European campaigns and was even included in the preliminary squad for the World Cup. However, Muñoz opted for more mobile forwards such as Butragueño, Eloy, Rincón, Carrasco, with Julio Salinas being the only natural center forward selected for Mexico, though the Basque strikers lacked both Santillana's goal scoring ability and experience. Santillana was always a better player for Madrid than for Spain, to be honest, but throughout his career, he was a reliable striker who could do the dirty work, battle in the box, score some crucial goals, and especially with his aerial ability. And personally, I believe he had something to offer in the World Cup, as he was a different type of attacker compared to the other forwards chosen by Muñoz.
As we discussed in our Real Madrid 84-85 discussion, as the season had progressed, Emilio Butragueño had become a star not only in Spain but across Europe. Was it seen that he was going to be the focal point of Spain from then on?
Yeah, by this point, Butragueño was already a star for Real Madrid and had helped the club to win its first European trophy in almost 20 years. He was an emerging European star and would win the Bravo Trophy as the best young talent in Europe at the end of the year. And I think the next year also. In Spain, apart of his footballing talent, he became an icon for a new generation in a country that was still completing a difficult transition into democracy and freedom. Butragueño and his teammates of La Quinta del Buitre became probably the most famous people in the whole country, at least on par with Felipe González, who was the socialist president who got Spain into NATO and the European Economic Community. They were special, and obviously Butragueño was leading the pack.
Apart from Butragueño and Zubizarreta, not many of the new caps established themselves in the future.
Hmm.
Was it because Munoz more or less kept faith with his established group?
Yes, Muñoz called up many new players to the national team and experimented in numerous friendlies of questionable value. But in the end, he always returned to his core group of 20, 25 trusted players. A newcomer had truly to impress to secure a place amongst his, I don't know, inner circle, if you want to call it like that. In Spain, we say that you shouldn't knock on the door, you should break it down. If you want to get into a close group as the national team was. Throughout all these podcasts we've recorded about the national team and Real Madrid also, we've seen many players making their debuts, playing one or two, three matches, sometimes I don't know, even spending a season in the squad. But in the end, we always come back to the same core players. The man from the 12-1 victory over Malta and the man from the summer of 84 in France. That said, one thing that you can criticize Munoz for is his willingness to give responsibility to these new players. It was up to them to prove their worth when it really matters. Sometimes in like really important games, we saw the
Yeah,
cases
that was
of Klaus
surprising.
Rojo,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So, and I think that's why friendlies ultimately didn't mean much because they were useless, right? But
Yeah.
important players, if you are debuting, just show me something, right? That was probably Munoz's mentality.
In closing, did Munoz's Spain seem capable to build upon the progress of 1984, or was there a feeling of stagnation at this point?
My impression is that the euphoria following Euro 84 faded during this qualification campaign. There were doubts about the quality and the commitment of the players in the national team. That basically those doubts returned to normal, right? I gave the example of Arconada's situation, for example, right? It's true that on the road to Mexico, certain expectations were created because the team had largely moved away from La Furia. Players like Butragueño, Michel, Gordillo, Maceda, Señor played a more technical and attractive style of football. There was some excitement about this shift, though not from everyone, and not by a long shot. Even today, a large part of Spanish fan base feels nostalgic for the days of La Furia. They kind of hate the tiki-taka thing. And in the end, the group going to Mexico is a mix of veterans from Euro 84 and young players like Butragueño, Mitchell, Chendo, Julio Salinas, Eloy, etc., right? There was quality, and the feeling left by the World Cup was positive. The sense of stagnation, I think, comes in the following cycle. There was a lot of excitement for Euro 88 with La Quinta del Buitre at its peak, but the team didn't perform well, and that's when the national team stopped evolving, which became, I think, evident at Italia 90. However, for Mexico, there was a sense that even though it had been a struggle to qualify, that the team was going through kind of a metamorphosis in the way they played, and it was worth waiting to see what they were capable of.
With that, I would like to thank you for your participation in this series. All our respective contact information is listed on the blog and podcast uploads. So, Sergio, thank you once again and hope to continue these discussions on football history.
My pleasure, Shahan. See you soon.
Thank you.